This is Average Sports.
By your average guys.
Eric.
And Ty. That would be so bad.
Yeah. This is Average Sports.
Your average sports.
Average Sports.
Thanks for tuning into another episode
You're
of
listening to Average Sports with your average guys.
Average Sports. Average guys. Eric and Ty.
It is another Average Sports episode with your average guys. I'm Ty. That's Eric on the line with us.
Oh, yeah. Here for another week.
Oh, there you are. For a second there, I thought I lost you.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. We're just playing the conference call.
Right.
Yeah.
So, which is a good thing we had practice with that in seasons past, but it's kind of too bad that we don't get to do the show together anymore. It's been months.
It has been. I think the last episode we did was right as seasons were canceling between NBA and NHL, and I remember doing that last episode. We got a sandwich from a great deli in St. Louis,
That's
and then
right.
we did the episode, and then that was it, man. That was the last time I saw you. So mid-March.
Man, that's crazy. And during all that time, we've really not seen a whole lot of professional sports return. We've been kind of keeping up to date on it, and that is, though, what the focus of this episode will be about. Let's start it off, though, with our butthole in sports. And this one, gosh, gotta give it to the way the MLB has just carried everything. So the owners and disagreeing with the MLBPA, the Players Association, and just all over the place with things. So, Eric, what's the latest right now?
Yeah, as far as the latest goes, is the owners want a really short season and move right into playoffs where they make the majority of their money. The players don't want to give up money by having a shortened season because they had already agreed to something back in March that they would just be prorated the amount of games that they play. So the players want a longer season and then, expanded playoffs, and the owners are just, neither of them are on the same page. The players had wanted like 120 games. The owners were like, 40 games, which that is a huge gap when you're talking about baseball. So, the most recent, I think the players are somewhere want to be around 90 games, and the owners are still in the high 60s, low 70s. And they seem to maybe be getting a little bit closer, but the deeper into summer this goes, the more likely I think the players are just going to walk away and just say, F this season, we're not going to do it.
At a certain point, it's not really worth it. And if you're hardly playing to be in the playoffs, what does that really look like? You're just playing a few games that when normally you go through the grind of the summer to earn a spot in October. It just won't feel the same, I think, at this point. And it's important to note that June 1st was an important deadline to even have an opening day by July 4th and have a certain number of days, games played. What was that, like 72 or 76 game season? We're past that. So now it's just not going to happen. So if we are looking at a short season, but I'm with you. I think the players are going to have a tough time agreeing to that, and it should not be a surprise at this point we don't see an MLB season at all this year, which is really just disappointing.
Yeah. And I think one of the worries too, and this is kind of secondary, but if baseball really drops the ball on this, and the NHL has, they've already moved into phase 2 of their plan to return. So just real quickly on that, their team facilities are now open. They can do small voluntary group workouts of up to 6 players.
Yeah.
Host cities still haven't been decided, but NHL's already on the way back. Right. We're about to talk about the NBA and their plan to return. What happens if both of these leagues are incredibly successful over the summer? And they're like, why do we want to compete with the NFL in October, November, December, January? Why don't we just start in late, November, December and try and compete with baseball, which we're much more in line to compete with than football? So what happens if these two sports are incredibly successful right now and they maybe decide, hey, we're going to push the season back a couple months? Still same length. We're just going to start it a little bit later. What does that do to baseball, too? Because they can't seem to get their act together.
Sure. So it feels like a real threat that the opportunity to steal fans away from a sport that was kind of in the balance of, having bring on new fans. They had a strong fan base, of course, in particular in certain markets, but I think they have a harder time than like a basketball or a football getting new fans involved. So it's an interesting take
baseball,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, baseball has the oldest fan age of any of the sports out there.
Yeah.
And that means they're not bringing on new age fans, and they have no competition really in the summer. They occasionally have to compete with the Olympics or the World Cup or something like that. That's in a very small window, but for the most part, they're not competing against these other major sports. Championships for NHL and NBA at the early season, and the start of football at the end of their season. But they get the prime time of the summer where they're not competing against anybody but themselves for the most part.
Very interesting.
So
I feel
they stand the chance to lose that here if they don't. Especially if the others are successful and they really fumble this opportunity to get back on the field.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to pay attention to it. And just by being a baseball fan or, a typical baseball fan, I feel old just by hearing that, Eric. So kind of makes me want to watch more hockey, which I think, is expected. Like, as you said, we expect them to return for the playoffs. They've come to an agreement. There's plans in place. We've discussed it. Should be a lot of fun. So what about, though, the other early summer hyped up sport that gets into the playoffs? The good old NBA. What's going on? Basketball. Are we
get to basketball, we're there.
Okay.
But before we get to basketball, I got a fun one for you that we talked about just before pre-show.
That's right. This is brand
new.
Major
League Soccer has announced that they were almost on the verge of a lockout, and then they got together in the 11th hour, so to speak, got their new collective bargaining agreement done. They have a plan to return July 8th at Walt Disney World. They're going to do a 54-match World Cup-style tournament over 35 days.
Hang on.
So the MLS is trying something new just to get back on the field and get some playing time in. So that's another one that is done. We don't cover a lot of soccer here, so that's the amount that we will. But over the summer, I'm sure we will be talking about this tournament. So
when you say
MLS
Disney World, though, that's where the games are happening, or that's where the players are staying?
Well, that's where they will be happening. So Walt Disney World is not. It's not Magic Kingdom. They're not playing in Magic Kingdom. But
Why
Walt
not?
Disney World, you forget that they have the worldwide of sports. So. Or the wide world of sports. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
They have this whole sports complex, which is where they're going to be holding the soccer games. And it's also, that's our transition into the NBA. That's where the NBA is going to be doing it as well, too.
Get out.
So the NBA plan to return is that they will be hosting everything at Walt Disney World, wide world of sports. Walt Disney World has 3 arenas that they can actually host these NBA games in. So they will be doing it there with Disney. All the players will be hosted there at the hotels. If you've never been to Disney World, it is, it's not just, a couple theme parks. Like, it's a massive resort with like really high-end hotels.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And they have the facilities and they have the accommodations to host exactly what this is. They've been hosting sports tournaments for years, usually on the not on the professional level like this, but they have the infrastructure to do it. So I'm not surprised that Walt Disney World was able to come to an agreement with the NBA and MLS to get that revenue onto their resort after missing months of people actually coming to stay at their resorts. So that's what we have. So the NBA, it has been approved by the players, it has been approved by the owners, and they have their plans to return. I'm going to kind of give a brief layout of what's going on here. Not all details are 100% final, but the infrastructure is there. The meat and the potatoes are there, so to speak. They may have a few things to figure out. Training camp will start June 30th, where the teams are able to get together and they will still do, 1-on-0 drills, 2-on-0 drills. Kind of moving forward, and then move into more of that 5-on-5 as they kind of go through some of the training camp. That lasts 1 week. Then they will all fly to Orlando, where they then have to be quarantined for 14 days. The state of Florida does have regulations set in place that, it's not everywhere across the country, but in particular, places like New York, if you fly in from New York, you have to be quarantined for 14 days before you can do anything. So I think the NBA is just holding that kind of across the board. After that quarantine, they're set to either do some exhibition games or some scrimmage games. That part hasn't been really figured out, but play is set to start July 31st. And so very end of July. So we're going to have an official regular season NBA game starting July 31st. There are going to be 22 teams that are coming in to play 8 regular season games each. The regular season games of the teams that are participating are every team that was within 6 games of the 8 seed of the playoff in both conferences have been invited to Orlando and will attend. The season will run from July 31st until no later than August or October 12th will be the last date possible. The NBA will move it up accordingly as playoff rounds finish, and there's going to be less travel time between rounds as well too, and in certain cities because they're all going to be based there. So they'll be able to fluctuate some of these games up, but absolute last day of the NBA this year will be October 12th. The regular season is now, they're kind of calling it the seeding games. So what's happening is you're taking these 22 teams and they're still fighting out for playoff positioning, whether they're going to be, what seed they are, or even getting into the actual playoffs themselves. So within those last 8 games, they will play them and figure out who comes out where. Every team will have breaks in between all of those games, except there will be one set of back-to-back games for every team that's included. So that's also kind of important to know as far as like a rest thing goes. They will be using three of the facilities there at Walt Disney World, Wide World of Sports, and they will have up to 4 games every single day at each site with 4 hours between each game.
Wow.
That allows for warm-ups, cleaning, sanitation of everything that's going on.
That's ambitious.
It's ambitious. We're going to have some morning basketball, probably late morning basketball, starting at 10, 11 our time, and it'll go until 11, maybe 11 o'clock our time or something like that to get it done. And then they will whittle it down from the 3 sites to 2 and 1 as they need less and less.
Yeah, fascinating.
Player testing is still being determined, but it looks like it's going to be on a daily basis, and they're figuring out which method of testing that they're going to use is really what it seems like. Every team is allowed 35 members from the team. So that's players, coaches, assistants, medical staff, 35 from that team is invited to Orlando. And then they are still working on figuring out how they're going to let families attend and be with the players.
Yeah. Like you mentioned,
no
there's
families.
going to be some other details, and there's so much to go on to all of this that some of those things are just going to have to remain a little flexible. But just the fact that they have the season and the details, the games, the staff that they would anticipate on having, a lot of having that core architecture put in place and then agreed upon, that's a huge step. And like you said, to have we are looking at basketball happening July 31st. That's big news. That's a big deal considering the environment that we've been in all year. Yeah,
100% couldn't agree more with you. NHL, they were the first to actually come to a plan and be like, hey, this is the plan, but dates still aren't fully set for the NHL. When they're going to return, they're kind of shooting, 3rd or 4th week of July as well too, but they haven't put a hardcore stamp date on it, at least one that I've seen. Where the NBA has, they're like, nope, this is the full plan. This is what it is. July 31st. We're starting play.
Did the NHL, by the way, pick their host cities?
No, they have not selected host cities yet. Okay. So still at large. I'm sure. Hopefully they've whittled it down and they're getting somewhere with negotiations with those cities and can get something figured out. So hopefully we'll get something soon. They're already moving into phase 2. There's still some time to kind of figure out that because that definitely will be down the road. But they're coming down to it.
But practices are happening. Hockey. Yeah, skates are on ice right now. And not to sound, I feel like this is asking too much of, I guess, perhaps the universe. But has the NBA really discussed what that 2020-21 season looks like if Game 7 doesn't end until October 12th? How do they just get right back into the next season? They just
I'm not sure.
So are they going to delay it?
Yeah, I do know what they have done is that the teams that aren't going to Orlando, they're going to be allowed to do OTAs and training camp as well too. So that for those teams that didn't get invited to Orlando or didn't qualify, they at least aren't going to have 10 months off before they then, kind of can get back on a court. So I at least know that they've got that in motion. I don't know that they have, obviously they can't start the next season right away. I highly doubt that the NBA PA is going to allow that. So I haven't seen anything on that, but at the same time, I also wasn't looking what the start of 2021, 2022 looks like. But my guess is it would almost be even a shortened season, maybe try out starting in December, January.
Which they wanted to do anyway at some point. They've been talking about that.
And then either shortening the season to still end on time and then get that full off